Hey there, I'm going through some upgrades on my 1982 Jeep Scrambler Dana front end. It's a Dana 30 front axle wide track version, and I thought this would be a helpful video while I'm in the middle of all this, just to cover some of the bases of some upgrades that you can do to a Dana 30, particularly on the outer end. So let me start out first by starting on the inside here. The orange you see is an RCV axle. I'm running those. Been running them for probably pushing 2 years now, and I've been really happy with them. A lot smoother operation at full wheel lock. Unlike a U-joint that you would have, a standard U-joint axle, you get some wheel hop and some chatter as you're turning, and this is a lot smoother. It's a constant velocity deal. I've added some Moog ball joints. They're a lot stronger, made in the US. They are greasable as well, which is nice. I actually do service, unlike some people, so it's always good to have a grease fitting top and bottom to get in there. The other one's a little bit difficult to get back to, but they're in there. On the outer end, this looks a little bit different. If you count the bolt holes on this hub, there's 6. On a factory CJ in the 80s, they all came with 5. So I'm going to talk through this upgrade a little bit in this video and try and cover the bases of that, what you would need to look for. So I think the transition year was right around 1980, and so prior to 1980, they ran this style. This is a 6-bolt hub. It's a little bit stronger. You got an extra bolt, and on CJs the 5 bolts are just notorious for loosening the bolts, and when you loosen them, sometimes you don't know it, then you break them, and then it's a really fun job of trying to drill those out with an easy out or something like that. So this is a nice upgrade. You get an extra bolt, and they're a little bit stronger, and I'm going to talk through some of the components of my fastener system that I'm going to use instead of just your standard bolt and lock washer to try and combat the problem of those loosening, which I've had a lot of success with through the years. So I'm just going to throw some new ones on it. So anyway, to pull this thing apart, if you need to go to a junkyard and hunt for a CJ5, which is a good junkyard Jeep to go and find, about a 78, 79, something like that CJ5, they've got these 6-bolt hubs. You're going to need to take a spindle socket and take these. There's 2 large nuts on the inside here and some lock washers. You pull those off, and then the whole hub assembly comes off. Outer bearing will probably fall out if it's not packed with grease very well, so be aware of that. And then you pull the outside or the whole outer assembly out, and then you're set. I would also recommend grabbing a spindle while you're there at that junkyard Jeep, so pull that out as well. We'll talk through those here in a second on the workbench, but that's pretty much the basics of how to pull one apart. So let's walk over here to the workbench, and I'm going to walk through some of these different models. Got them all laid out here. So this is what you would have found in the mid-80s CJs. This is a 5-bolt hub, locking hub, and then the 5-bolt hub assembly and a spindle from one of those. So this is an old one. This came off of my 82 Dana 30 front end. Kind of the weaker option. I don't know why AMC Jeep did this at the time, maybe just saving some cost or thought it was a better design, but they don't seem to work quite as well. This is the upgrade. This is what we just saw on the Jeep. So pretty much 6 bolts. The hub otherwise is pretty much identical. It's just 6 bolts, a little bit different design. And then this is the hub, the locking hub that you would find on one of those CJ5s. This one came off of a 78 CJ5. Simple 2 and 4 position, and has a little gear on the inside that slides in and out on the axle shaft and engages and disengages. So pretty simple design. What I'm upgrading is to this. This is a Warn premium hub, so same number of bolt holes, a little bit stronger, probably considerably stronger actually, and I believe their premium hubs are lifetime warranty. So this is a really cool upgrade, really good upgrade. The part number for that from Warn right here is 9062, and the coolest part about all that is this right here, the country of origin, United States of America. So it came from Clackamas, Oregon, in their facility there. So these are fresh, 5/16/19, just a few weeks before shooting this video here. So anywho, that's your part number for that. That's the good upgrade for that. This is the spindle socket that you're going to need to pull the nuts off the spindle that hold your whole hub assembly together. So you need to grab one of these. I don't have a part number or anything, or even the size for you. I've had this thing for years. As you can see, the hole's pretty wallered out. I'm probably gonna have to replace it soon, but these are pretty common, easy to find. Most part stores will carry them. So let's talk about bearings real quick. The kit that I got came from Nitro Gear and Axle. This is AKF-D30, and that covers the 76 to 86, CJ5, 7, and 8, Dana 30. So the bearings you get in that kit are Koyo, really good quality bearing, and this seal here also comes with it. And this is your inner race. The simple part about that is they just sit down in here. They're pressed down in, I guess, inside the hub. And if you see closely, there's these notches. The trick is to take a brass punch and knock out the opposite one. So don't hit the upper one when you're looking down on it. Hit the bottom one, go past it, hit the bottom one down in there with a hammer, knock it out. The brass punch won't mar it or mar the inside of your surface where the race is going to ride. So knock both those out, clean it out real good with brake cleaner or something like that. And then I'd also recommend grabbing a set of these little press discs. There's a kit that you can buy. Let me walk over here and I'll show you all this kit. This is from Harbor Freight Tools. They're Chinese probably, but they work just fine. The 3 missing, I'll show you here in just a second. But those are handy, nice and good clean fit to fit down in that hole. So what you're going to need to do is press that race down and into the hub, as well as the seal on the inner side. So let me walk over here to the press. This is the press that I'm using. This is an old World War II era Dake press, which is just huge. But you set the hub assembly up here, and then take one of these. Here's the other 2 that are missing out of that kit over there. 76 and an 81 millimeter seem to work pretty good on the CJ hubs. But those press the bearing race in, and then you drop the wheel bearing in, and then the seal, and press it in. So let me talk you through another little process here that I go through. This is a really handy tool. This is made by Lyle. You can pick them up at auto parts stores or even on Amazon, I believe. But it's the bottom, you fill it up with grease, and then you pull this little white plunger guy out. Drop your bearing down in there over that post that comes up in the middle. See all the grease coming out at the bottom? There's some holes that allow it to come up from the bottom up through that white plate in the middle. And then you push this little plunger down. I like this thing because you've got a series of little channels on one side, and you can slide it in on a vise and clamp it together with a vise. That makes life a lot easier if you're wanting to just press them in a little bit quicker. It's kind of hard to push them down by hand, especially on bigger bearings. So that's a handy tool made by Lyle. One other thing I'll cover is the fastener setup. I mentioned this earlier. So what the worn kit will come with is just a standard washer and a lock washer, and those are fine, they're good. But you need to really keep an eye on your torque and make sure those bolts aren't loosening. So about 10 years ago, I found this system down at Fastenal made by Nordlock, and I was pretty impressed by the design, a little overwhelmed by the cost, but I said, you know, what the heck, I'll give it a try. And 10 years later, these things are still working for me. I've never had a bolt loosen. They've always held the proper torque, and that is paramount with this style of hub. These things are bad about loosening up, and CJ guys break the bolts all the time. When they loosen, you'll end up breaking a bolt off, and then you got to try and take an easy out and drill them out, and it's just a royal pain. So I tried these Nordlocks, and like I said, 10 years in, they're still going strong. So I decided, while I've got all this apart, it's just time to replace these Nordlocks. They were pretty worn out. These are the ones that have been on for about 10 years. And this is one of the original bolts. So I bought a whole new bag of fasteners. The bolts that you're going to need are 3/8/16 by 1.5 inch. That's an ideal bolt. I grab these at Fastenal. Here's your part number if you want that, 0115109. Get a big bag of them. And then the Nordlock fasteners, these are 3/8 inch ID fastener systems. And I call it a system because if you look real closely, there's actually 2 pieces. If you see the yellow section here, there's actually 2 little washers that sit up against one another. And I think they've even got some kind of little bit of glue that kind of holds them together while you're assembling it. But the cool part about this design is if you look real closely in this diagram, there's serrations on the top and bottom of the washers. And those grab right into the bottom of the bolt and then the top of the surface that you're clamping against. So if you look over here on my old hubs, you can see where these Nordlocks have grabbed in nice and tight, and then at the bottom of the bolt head, they've actually created their little notches on the bottom of it. And then the magic of these lock washers is the little ramps that are cut into the face of these washers. If you can see the gentle slope coming up, they go in between. Let me go over here this diagram, you can see them better. You see how they're sloped upwards? So in order for these to loosen, the serrations again are grabbing the bottom of the bolt head and then the surface. And if the bolt tries to turn to loosen, the two washers effectively have to rise up and separate from one another because of the design of the ramps. And so the more it loosens, the harder it tightens, basically on the outside edges where the serrations are. So it holds it nice and snug, which I love. I think that's just a brilliant design. I'm kind of surprised these aren't out there more often. I guess maybe it is the cost, I'm not really sure, but this pack of 20 was probably about 30 bucks, so do the math. They are expensive, but for 10 years, heck, that's a bargain for never having to worry about it. So anyway, that's what I'm going to be running on the new ones. I'm going to run those with the Warren hubs, with the Nordlock washers, some grade 8 fasteners. You're going to want to torque these down to 30 foot-pounds. That's the torque spec for these bolts that hold the locking hub assembly to your hub. So that's 30 foot-pounds. And then the lock washers that hold your bearings in, the whole hub assembly, you're going to torque the inner one down to 50 foot-pounds. I'm going to walk over here and do a little demonstration real quick, just show you. So what you're going to want to do is get your spindle nut socket in there, tighten this down to 50 foot-pounds. And then what I recommend doing, and any manual will tell you, give it a little spin. Grab the rotor and give it a spin back and forth. Make sure you don't have any resistance more than normal. You don't hear any weird noises or binding. Give it a little wiggle. See if it moves at all at 50 foot-pounds. If it doesn't, you're good. If it does bind, back it off just a little bit. Pretty sure the Haynes manual says back it off like a 1/6 of a turn, 1/6 of a turn, and that'll loosen up that binding. But I've been pretty good with brand new set of bearings. It's usually been good to go at 50 foot-pounds. So you tighten that inner one in. Then there's a little washer. Well, there's a washer that goes in and seats right up against your bearing first. Don't forget that. So put the washer in there, and then the first nut, tighten it to 50 foot-pounds, test it for binding. Next washer, and then the outer spindle nut goes on, and you also torque that to 50 foot-pounds, and then just give it another test. And then you're pretty much set as far as bearings go. I like to go, as I mentioned earlier, these are RCV Axles. When I've got all this apart, I usually give it a couple of pumps of that Molly grease that they ship you with the axles. Just give it a few pumps. It's kind of hard to get to when you got the locking hub assembly on it. You got to pull that off in order to get to that. So always give it a little bit of grease when you got it apart. I think they recommend like 3 to 5 pumps or something like that. Doesn't take much, but just keep it happy. And I think that pretty much covers it. So if you got any questions, post them in the comments below, and I'll try and answer those. I'll try and dig up some part numbers if anybody needs them. I think I cover most of the important ones here. So anyway, hope that helps folks on early CJ Dana 30s. Have a good one.